Millions of people heard Karoline Leavitt explode on TV, but most people missed the quiet courage behind Jasmine Crockett's inquiry. This moment, even though it was short, is more important now than ever, and I promise it will make you reassess everything you thought you understood about political arguments. Things went wrong quickly. Jasmine Crockett looked cool and collected as she sat under the harsh studio lights. People will underestimate you when you're this calm, and it will be too late. Karoline Leavitt sat across from her, polished and smiling, ready to talk about the things she had practiced 100 times. It was meant to be another Sunday discussion on Capitol Sunday, live from a studio in Bethesda, Maryland. But then, in less than 4 minutes, Jasmine changed everything with just one question. "Karoline," she replied, her voice firm, "do you know about the memo going around among GOP communications teams about the former president's recent health evaluations?" That was it, a simple query. No blaming, no angry outbursts. It's just an inquiry. But Karoline's face trembled. Not very evident, but enough to suggest that the control she had when she came in was eroding. It was only a second, but it spoke a lot. Karoline turned around to try to take charge again. "I don't comment on unverified rumors," she murmured, pushing her blonde hair behind her ear with a stiff smile. But it didn't work. Jasmine didn't give up. "It's not a smear if it's coming from inside your own camp," she said. She kept her voice calm and steady. "The memo is real. It has been confirmed by several sources." And just like that, Karoline's hold over the situation began to slip. She shot back, "That's nonsense. You're just repeating fringe blog garbage." Jasmine leaned in a little, her gaze steady. "Then why not deal with it directly? If there's nothing to hide, wouldn't Trump's doctors be able to clear this up in a matter of seconds?" For a time, the room was so quiet that it felt like it was going to suffocate. Karoline, who was upset, started talking over Jasmine. "This is exactly what the media does wrong." She said, "A witch hunt. Donald Trump is in good health. He's sharper than ever." Jasmine didn't move, and her remarks were like a constant stream that cut through Karoline's interruptions. "I'm just asking a question," she added. "Voters are already talking behind closed doors. You can try to change the subject all you want, but the room holds its breath every time he goes off script." The mood in the studio had altered by this moment. The audio technician moved closer to his monitor. A segment producer said into a headset, "She's losing it." Karoline's voice broke. She directed her wrath not toward Jasmine, but at the crew. "I was told this was about legislation," she said angrily. "This is a setup. You think this is news?" Her voice shook, and she even pulled on her mic as if she wanted to escape. But Jasmine sat still and didn't care. "We can talk about laws," she remarked in a calm, even voice. "But the health of a presidential candidate is a matter of public concern. If your party is sending out memos about it, whether for strategy or damage management, it's worth inquiring about." The feed didn't stop. The cameras kept rolling. And for once, the truth was clear to everyone. But most people didn't know that the real storm hadn't hit yet. It all began months ago in Toledo, Ohio, during a private strategy meeting where senior GOP communications consultants were secretly talking about how to manage the campaign language for 2025. But this wasn't simply a regular gathering. The air felt different, tense. Some of Trump's campaign personnel had started to notice small shifts in his conduct, forgetting names, losing track of what you're thinking, and saying things over and over. Little things that shouldn't be overlooked. Cameron Ellsworth, a youthful advisor, heard it all. He heard two high-ranking officials talking about backup plans while he was on a coffee break. They were worried about Trump's mental lapses. They even talked about a memo that was going around the office. Cameron wasn't attempting to make trouble. He just started writing everything down. He took what he had to a local political site called the Hardly Report a week later. They got the letter in their inbox. It was 3 pages of internal terminology, talking about things like cognitive pauses and warning against spontaneous appearances, especially in the late afternoon. It wasn't supposed to be public, but as soon as it was, things started to get out of hand. The Hartley report didn't put out the whole paper right away. They did what good reporters do. They asked for comments. The answer came quickly: fake. Don't give it any respect. But something didn't feel right. As other GOP members quietly backed out of afternoon interviews and Trump's following events were either canceled or scripted, it seemed like the whole thing was confirming what the memo had suggested. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't the only one to see the problem. But she was the first person to put it on national TV. And she did it without thinking twice. Jasmine's producers weren't sure, but she understood this wasn't about gossip. It was all about being consistent. She informed her producer, Cedric Tran, Fox would be leading with it every hour if this were Biden. Cedric wasn't sure, but Jasmine kept on. She formed her own case by talking to campaign volunteers, reading notes from local media, and obtaining archival film of rallies. Jasmine thought she had all the proof she needed when a former employee finally told her that the memo was true. Jasmine didn't do her makeup touch-ups the night before the show. She wasn't scared, but she realized that if she said the wrong thing, this could spiral into a controversy about her instead of the matter at hand. Karoline Leavitt, on the other hand, was ready with the answer she always gives. Her team told her about the reports, but they didn't think Jasmine would go this hard, this quickly. Karoline thought she could change direction and avoid. They thought Jasmine would stick to policy barbs, throw in a few digs that were easy to see coming, and then call it a day. But they got it wrong. The main problem wasn't thinking Jasmine was too smart. It was thinking the audience wouldn't notice the change when it happened. And when it happened, it was stronger than everybody thought it would be. Jasmine came in on the morning of the broadcast, calm and ready as the countdown clock rolled down to 9 a.m. Karoline got there not long after and could already feel the tension in the air. The presentation started out fine, but as Jasmine asked her question, everything changed. Do you know about the internal GOP memo going around about the health of the former president? The room was quiet. Karoline reacted quickly, but not in the way she had practiced. Everyone could see that she didn't know how to reply in that time. And there it was, the moment that changed everything. The quiet, the strain, and the fight for control. In those few seconds, Jasmine showed something that no one thought she could. She was cool, collected, and resolute. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is ask the correct question. Jasmine Crockett didn't only establish a name for herself. She changed the story. And she did it with only one question. "I'm sorry," Karoline finally murmured, forcing a forced laugh. "Are you really asking me to answer a blog that says the president isn't well?" Jasmine Crockett didn't move. Not a blog. A document sent around the company. I've seen it, and so have a few other places. There was a lot of stress. Karoline waved her hand as if to say no and laughed again. It wasn't nervous laughter yet, but it was near. This is just classic election year drama. There's nothing to clear up. Jasmine leaned forward a little bit, and her voice didn't change. Then she dropped the bombshell. Why are Republican strategists changing the way events are run? Why are rallies now limited to controlled speeches, no live Q&As, and no press scrums? That started about the same time this memo came out. Karoline's face got hard. She looked at the camera for a second, then at Jonah, who was sitting still just past the teleprompter. Karoline yelled, "You planned this all week, didn't you? This little trick, you want to catch me?" "No trap," Jasmine said gently. "I'm just asking what millions of people are wondering." The camera didn't cut away. Cedric, who was watching from behind the glass, waved off the floor manager, telling him that the viewers needed to see this happen exactly as it was. Karoline made her first real mistake. She started to raise her voice, not with power, but with panic. "This is ambush television. You caught me off guard. You people don't care about the truth. You care about the headlines." Jasmine, remaining calm, folded her hands. "The facts are in the memo," she continued, her voice steady. 3 pages, confirmed by staffers. If they're lying, we should talk about it. But avoiding the subject doesn't assist anyone, especially voters. Karoline's body language changed by only an inch, but the audience noticed. Her voice lost part of its steadiness. I'm not going to sit here and listen to garbage from sources that can't even source properly. Jasmine spoke up for the first time, calm and clear. Maybe if your team did real journalism, we would have figured this out by now. Karoline's voice broke, and the brush-it-off strategy wasn't working anymore. And online, the clip was already going viral. One tweet said, "Did she just confirm the memo exists?" Another said, "Why won't Karoline answer the damn question?" Cedric leaned over the producer's shoulder in the control room and said, "Get ready to upload this the second we're off air." Then Jasmine tightened the screw a bit further. "There is a difference between privacy and secrecy," she stated in a calm, clear voice. "If there is no problem, there is no reason to hide. But the American people have a right to know if something is wrong. It isn't about parties, it's about the president." Karoline didn't say anything. Her face tightened again, but this time it was just frustration and pressure. She looked down at her mic, adjusted her earpiece, and murmured something off camera. Jonah shook his head and looked away. Karoline then stated, "I don't have to sit here while you people try to smear a great man who has done more for this country than anyone in your party ever has." The room was quiet. Jasmine didn't say anything. She just kept looking at Karoline. The director murmured into his earpiece, "Let it hang. Let the silence breathe." The audience didn't need fancy visuals or analysis. The look on Karoline's face conveyed a narrative that was louder than anything anyone said. But the actual explosion didn't happen in that chair. It happened seconds later when they went to commercial break. As soon as the red light on the camera went out and the show went to commercial, the air snapped like a rubber band that had been stretched too far. Karoline ripped off her earpiece without care, and it hit the desk with a loud noise. The makeup team jumped, and one of the interns, who had only been with the network for a week, actually stepped back, not knowing what would happen next. "You set me up," Karoline spat, jumping halfway up from her chair. Her voice was sharp and genuine, not like the polished version you see on TV. "You blindsided me with that nonsense." That wasn't on the prep sheet. Jasmine kept sitting. "Nothing I asked was made up," she said quietly. "We put the memo under possible follow-ups for segment 2. You were told what to do." Karoline stood up and walked behind her chair. "You threw it at me like it was gospel," she said. "Like you're the truth police." Cedric stepped out from behind the control booth, calm. "You're live again in 90 seconds, he said, keeping his voice level. "You can finish the interview or we can cut to panel. It's up to you." Karoline turned on him, and now she was really falling apart. "I came here in good faith, Cedric," she cried, her voice shaking. "I sat down expecting a fair segment. You just let a hit job happen. Your anchor made me look bad on live TV." Cedric didn't move. "No one made you come, and no one stopped you from answering the question." Jonah, who was riveted to his phone, saw that group chats were full with commotion. "She lost control. Pull her now. This is bad." Jasmine took a sip from a water bottle at her desk. Her hand was solid and her stance was the same. One of the associate producers whispered to Cedric, "We can stretch the commercial for another minute if needed." "No," Cedric said. "We go back on time." Karoline stood close to the set wall, her jaw clenched. She could feel the eyes on her, not just from the people in the room, but also from the screen that she knew was still filming everything she did. The viral moment hadn't finished. It was still going on. She took a long breath and went back to her seat. "We're not done," she said quietly. "No," Jasmine answered, "we're not." Then the countdown began. 10, 9, 8. There was so much tension in the last few seconds that it could have damaged camera lenses. When they came back from break, Jasmine introduced the following part as if nothing had happened. We're back with GOP spokesperson Karoline Leavitt to keep talking about transparency and campaign communication. Karoline smiled, but it was too tight, like a smile that was too tight from too much pressure. You know how to twist things just enough to make people doubt reality, she added into the mic. You're very good at this. Jasmine said, that's not what I'm doing. I'm holding a microphone to what's already happening. People can see for themselves. Karoline turned her whole body to face Jasmine now, giving up the camera-friendly angles. You want me to speak for someone else's health? I am not his doctor. No one wants a diagnosis, Jasmine said. Just the truth. There was a pause for a few seconds, and the camera stayed wide, with both women in the frame. There was no music or visuals, just the weight of two different facts. Karoline finally said, You want honesty? Okay, but not on the record. Jasmine arched an eyebrow. That's how you feel about the memo? No, Karoline answered. That's my answer to all this nonsense you're making. It wasn't a win, but it was a turn that allowed her some ground to stand on, at least for the time being. 5 minutes later, the broadcast ended. Jasmine signed off, and the credits rolled. Karoline left the set quickly, with no handshakes or goodbyes, and went straight to her car with Jonah and 2 staffers from the GOP media office. She had just seen the live feed crash on X. The internet didn't care how she departed. It only cared about what she said when she broke down the second time. Karoline went out the exit door, and a wave of frenzied energy swept over the studio. Cedric took off his headphones and instructed the video editor, clip that last 10 minutes. No cuts, no overlays, raw feed. Jasmine unpinned her mic and gave it to a tech assistant. Her mind was racing, but she stayed calm. That last comment from Karoline was likely to start more than just gossip. Jasmine picked up her phone and opened her text thread with Maya Foster, a political analyst at another network. There were 2 texts waiting for her. Maya, girl, she folded on live TV. Maya, are you okay? Everything's fine, Jasmine said. Let's see where the fire goes. Karoline was rushing away in a black Ford Edge into a luxury suite at the Fairmont in D.C. She hadn't uttered a word since the vehicle door slammed. Jonah sat next to her, pallid, typing furiously. He was already getting calls from party strategists. You have 20 minutes to send over a statement, Jonah remarked carefully, referring to the GOP press director. They want to control the story before Capitol Sunday clips hit X. Karoline didn't say anything. I need to think, she said angrily. I'm not letting them hang this on me. Jonah looked at his phone again. A meme of her yelling during the show was already going around with the caption, when you realize the memo might be real. A few minutes later, you saw how she snapped. Everyone in the country saw it. Jasmine could feel it in the air. Karoline's collapse had left a mark. Cedric continued. She thought I was going to walk her through softball questions. Yeah, Jasmine said, and instead you showed her the difference between talking points and real journalism. For a minute, the room was quiet. Jasmine asked, Do you think they'll come for me? She wasn't terrified, but she was being practical. Cedric said, Maybe. But you were surgical. If they try, we'll let the tape speak. Outside the studio, the news cycle was already in full swing. Karoline's on-air breakdown was trending, screenshots were everywhere, and podcasts were scrambling to do emergency recordings. Journalists who had been hesitant to mention the memo were now sharing redacted copies, all verified by internal sources. By the middle of the afternoon, the story was already taking shape. Trump's media team gave a standard denial. The president is still in great health. Claims otherwise are politically motivated. But it was too late. The discourse had changed. The question was no longer if something was wrong, but why people were working so hard to hide it. Jasmine looked at her phone at 5:40 p.m. She got a lot of interview requests, panel invites, and podcast offers in her mailbox. But the message that meant the most to her was from her mother, who always watched. It said, I'm proud of you. That was different. At the Fairmont, Karoline was trying to fix things. 4 people, 3 laptops, and 1 goal to change the story. She ambushed you, one of the communications reps said, but Karoline shook her head. Do you think anyone believes that now? It's my face on screen, yelling. It's me looking scared. They won't care what Jasmine asked. They'll just keep replaying my reaction until it's stuck in everyone's head. The room became quiet. Everyone agreed. Karoline opened her laptop and clicked on the video of the part. She watched it again, but this time she wasn't scared. She went back to the part when she started yelling. She heard her voice break and saw her hand shake on the desk. She didn't say anything. She just shut the laptop. But Jasmine still had more to say. That section had opened a door, and what happened next would place both sides in the spotlight. The clip had been watched more than 3.8 million times on 3 different platforms before nightfall. The network didn't even have to advertise it. Those who watched did the labor. Recordings of the screen. TikTok videos that explain things. Influencers who never talked about politics started to respond. There were a lot of hashtags going around, like hashtag Tash Tash, hashtag Jasmine was right, hashtag Healthgate, and hashtag Memo Matters. But it wasn't simply Karoline's collapse that made it stick. It was how Jasmine said it. She stayed calm and never pushed for drama, but she kept asking the same question. Why hide it if there's nothing to hide? That line impacted harder than party lines. People connected with it because they saw something deeper. What people say in real life when they know something's wrong but don't want to express it. The story was the first thing on every show that Monday morning. News Nation and CBS Mornings played the video of Karoline's reaction over and again. Some anchors laughed in an embarrassing way, while others just sat there in shock. No matter what, it was on every screen. Shirley Grant, a retired nurse from Oakland, recorded a short video in which she said, "I've worked with patients for 30 years. I can tell when someone isn't feeling well, and I can tell when individuals are trying to disguise it." A lot of us were already thinking what Jasmine Crockett just said. 3 news blogs wrote about her video. During a live broadcast in Tampa, Colin Ridge, a conservative podcast presenter who is known for backing Trump, stated, "I don't like her politics, but Crockett was fair. She asked real questions." That's Karoline's problem if she can't handle them. It wasn't a full fracture in the GOP wall, but it was still a lot of pressure. Karoline understood this too. That afternoon, she called into a radio show to try to get back on track. This time, her voice was quiet, and there was no sign of the earlier explosion. The left wants to make everything a scandal. I was caught off guard, but I don't regret standing up for the president. It was planned out. Safe. But that wasn't enough. Too many people have already seen the real-time reaction. The screenshot of Karoline's frowning expression during the program had become the new political meme of the week, with the snarky comment totally calm and in control. Jasmine stayed late at the studio. She didn't want to go back home yet. She was still wired, but not from caffeine. It was from adrenaline. It was strange to know that a question she posed on the television had somehow revealed something greater. Cedric brought her Vietnamese takeout, which was their normal late-night order when things got too much. "Are you okay?" he questioned as he gave her the white paper bag. Jasmine said, "I'm fine," but then she warned, "This is about to get louder." Cedric nodded. "Do you think you started something?" "I didn't start it," Jasmine said. "I just pulled a thread," I said. Cedric took a seat in the corner chair. The newsroom was quiet now, with only the sound of muted monitors on the far wall. He looked at the memo that was still on her desk, with the censored lines circled. He asked, "Do you think it's true?" "I don't think it matters if it's all true," Jasmine said. "That's enough of it." A group of young political science majors from Howard University had congregated outside. One of them held up a placard that said, "Truth doesn't shout, it stands." Cedric said something about it. Jasmine grinned a little. "They understand," she said. By midnight, major news organizations, including the BBC and Al Jazeera, were publishing stories with headlines like U.S. political debate erupts over president's health questions. The fire had become worse. But Jasmine didn't care about getting viral. People needed to stop scrolling past the smoke and look up. They needed to ask who's holding the fire extinguisher and who's fanning the flames. By Tuesday afternoon, you could feel the pressure on Capitol Hill. Not literally, but you could see it in the pinched faces of aides who were walking quicker than normal. It was like the term nonsense was written into the DNA of press secretaries. The Republican leaders worked hard to keep things the same. What did they do first? Act like it didn't happen. Russ Vance, the House Majority Leader, conducted a press conference outside his office in Cheyenne, Wyoming. He added, "This is just noise, a distraction. The president is doing well, and the American people know better than to believe rumors that are dressed up as news." But while Vance was talking, his own staff were getting calls from contributors, county leaders, and former military supporters who were not asking if Trump was sick, but why no one was being honest about it. Some Democrats on the other side of the aisle began to speak up. Senator Denise Yamada from Oregon said, "Health should never be used as a weapon, but it shouldn't be kept a secret either. Every candidate, no matter what party they belong to, should be honest with voters." But not all Democrats jumped in. The DNC didn't say anything. Some experts told their customers to remain out of the noise and let the GOP eat itself. But the pressure was still rising, especially from conservative media. The Morning Standard, a right-leaning daily from Cincinnati, published an editorial on Wednesday morning with a headline that made both sides stop and think, "We deserve to know what's being hidden from voters." The editorial didn't say that anyone was guilty or that Trump was unfit. It just asked questions and wanted responses. But the most surprising turn of events may have come from Penelope Lang, a former congresswoman. She hadn't been in office for 5 years and hadn't spoken anything since she left politics. But recently she shared a 2-minute video on her Substack where she talked right into her phone. "I worked with Donald Trump. I was in rooms with him and heard him talk. Things altered over time. It wasn't sudden or evident, but it was real. You may call Jasmine Crockett a lot of things, but don't call her a liar." The clip blew up. People who didn't like Lang were sharing it too. It didn't seem political. It seemed real. Karoline Leavitt, on the other hand, had stopped talking. No interviews, no tweets, no response. Her team wrote one line, "The issue has been dealt with. We're moving forward." But when everyone is still watching, silence isn't a strategy. Karoline was in damage control in her hotel room. 6 experts proposed going on Tucker's podcast to change the story and blame the network for editorial entrapment. Some others sought to change their minds and said that Democrats were bullying women in the media. Karoline didn't believe it. "They'll smell the spin," she added. "This isn't going to go away." Jasmine was being interviewed for a late-night segment at WTOP in a studio across the city. The host, Carla Mendez, leaned in with real interest and asked, "Jasmine, you've become the face of a very heated moment. Did you expect this big of a reaction?" Jasmine thought about Karoline's shaking fingers, the note, and the text from her mother that said, "I'm proud of you." "I didn't expect it," she continued, "but maybe I should have. We might have been quiet for too long." Carla said, "Yes. And what do you want people to learn from this?" Jasmine stopped for a moment before saying, "That truth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's an easy question, and sometimes the way someone acts tells you everything you need to know." The interview was over. The quote was cut short. It quickly became the new Twitter banner, "Truth isn't always loud." But Jasmine would be put to the test in a way she hadn't planned for in the next 24 hours. Now, the pressure wasn't on her question. It was on her. Jasmine had been through a lot of media storms before, such press tours, campaign flare-ups, and live debates that got out of hand, but this one seemed different. This seemed like it was about me. She woke up the next morning to almost 300 new emails. Every 10 seconds, her phone rang, calls from unknown numbers, mentions, and tags. Most of them were helpful, but some weren't. Keep going. You're brave. You finally said what we've all been thinking. But in between the accolades came the bad messages. You're going to regret this. Watch your back, fake news witch. For a long time, she looked at the screen before putting her phone face down on the kitchen table. Moxie, her dog, nuzzled her ankle in Silver Spring because he could see she was still. It was raining outside, and the drips were slowly tapping against the window. Jasmine walked about inside. The apartment was silent, but her thoughts was not. She couldn't shake the notion that she had gotten into something deeper than she had thought. Not just media spin or turmoil on the internet, something more serious. Sure, political pressure, but more than that, the burden of being believed. People were now looking to her as a voice, not simply as a host or a journalist. A sign that you were brave enough to say what others were afraid to say, and there isn't a manual for that level of stress. Later that day, her dad called. He is now retired and lives in Baltimore. He never liked to talk about politics, but this time, he didn't wait for niceties. Are you okay? Yeah, Jasmine answered, not sure whether that was real. Are you sure? She stopped for a moment. No, honestly. I feel like I started a fire, and now everyone wants me to carry it. Her dad breathed out into the phone. Jazz, you didn't light anything. You held up a mirror. That's not the same. What he said hung in the air. Jasmine didn't weep. She didn't have to. But she sat back in her chair and let the quiet settle. She got an invitation from 60 Minutes that night. They needed a whole section that included information about the memo, her methodology, and the viral moment. It was hard to resist. People in her position dream of this kind of stuff. But she didn't say yes, not yet. Because part of her wasn't sure if being in the spotlight helped or harmed the talk. Two things happened almost at the same time in the next few days. The first question was about whether the president had recently had cognitive tests, and the White House press secretary looked quite uncomfortable. She avoided the topic and said she would make a statement after proper review. Then one of Trump's former aides, who is no longer involved in politics, came out on a Florida station. He said he has noticed changes up close. He was bright in 2016, but now he gives too many blank glances. There were too many times when he asked the same question again in 10 minutes. I say that because I used to believe in him. Now the tail had legs. It was strolling without Jasmine, which should have made her feel better. But instead, she felt something else, loneliness. People praised her, celebrated her, and even thanked her. But she realized that being the first to ask the uncomfortable question didn't always pay off. It sometimes came with quiet. People will sometimes wait for you to take the hit before they move forward. And what about Jasmine? She had taken the hit. After another panel, she sat alone in her car with the motor off one night. A calm Target parking lot reflected the headlights. She didn't have to be any place. She just wasn't ready to go back home. She thought about the moment on the air when she asked Karoline the question and waited. The quiet, the change, the coming apart. She thought about how many individuals had told her they felt validated, that they had finally heard someone say what needed to be spoken. And then, at last, she grinned. That was enough. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't done anything. She had asked a query. And by doing this, she helped others feel like they weren't crazy for asking. But there was still one chapter to finish. One last thing that would bring this storm to an end. 4 days after the program aired, Jasmine went to the Wusa 9 studio for a quiet taping. Just her and the people who work on the camera. No visitors. No heated panel. Just an editorial straight to the camera. Something she didn't do very often. But this time it was important. The network had made room for her to express what she needed to say. No script. No teleprompter. Just her voice. The lights were gentle, and the atmosphere was quiet as she sat alone on stage. She fixed her lapel mic, cleared her throat, and then stared right into the camera. "I didn't think a simple question would go this far," she remarked. "I wasn't trying to expose anyone or get a lot of views. I was just doing what I've always done, asking what needed to be asked." She stopped for a moment. "Some people said I set Karoline up. Others said I embarrassed her. But here's what I know. When someone reacts louder than the question, people pay attention. And they should." Cedric observed quietly from behind the glass. There were no notes in front of him. He merely listened, like most people would. Jasmine went on. "This isn't really about Trump's health. It's about how power reacts to being watched. Do we get honesty or just anger?" She leaned forward and spoke in a steady voice. "We've lost more than civility. We've lost the thread of democracy itself if we can't ask our leaders basic questions about their duties." The room stayed quiet. "Don't fidget. No hints that are muttered." Jasmine made her voice softer. "I know this week has been crazy. I've seen the love and the hate. I've also read emails from people who feel like they finally saw someone on TV ask what they've been saying at dinner tables and barbershops for months." A little smile. "That means a lot to me." The crew let her breathe. She didn't hurry the end. "I'm not here to change anyone's mind. I'm here to keep asking questions. If we stop doing that, if we stop questioning power when it gets too comfortable, we become complicit." She looked straight into the camera and talked to each person watching. "And I don't care about comfort. I care about the truth. That's all. No big exit. No flashy ending. Just a cut to black." There was no fanfare or countdown before the piece aired that night. Just a modest drop between shows that are on at night. But people did watch, and they did remember. The next day, a number of journalists from all sides released video of her last comments. Even many who didn't agree with her ideas said she had spoken something that not many people would. A New Hampshire town hall moderator asked a GOP primary candidate that weekend if he would promise to release cognitive health reports every year. The candidate stopped. "I don't know yet," he said. "But after this week, it's a fair question." The ground didn't quake. It didn't change the outcome of an election, but it changed the line. And sometimes that's all it takes. Jasmine stayed focused for the next few months. She didn't take advantage of the fame. She didn't parlay the occasion into a book deal, a podcast, or a speaking tour. She went back to work, back to her desk, and back to the questions. But now her inbox seemed different. The audience did too. So did the tone. People listened not because she yelled or argued, but because she kept grounded in something simple. Ask what others are too scared to, and let the quiet do the rest. And if there's one thing to remember from all of this, it's this: ask the hard question, even if it makes others uncomfortable, even while the cameras are on, even when the answers aren't easy to find. Ask anyhow, because that's how you find out the truth. Hit the subscribe button if this story touched you in any way. Not for the clicks or the stats, but because the truth should be at your table too.